Bruno, the brave shepherd dog, in the quiet countryside, nestled among rolling hills and vast green meadows, lived a strong and loyal shepherd dog named Bruno. Bruno wasn't just any dog. He was the heart and protector of the flock that belonged to an old shepherd named Mr. Fletcher. Bruno had soft honey-colored fur, big brown eyes full of love, and a bark that could be heard from one end of the valley to the other. His daily routine was simple yet noble: guard the sheep, guide them to the greenest pastures, and protect them from any danger that might lurk in the wild. Every morning, at the crack of dawn, Bruno would rise, stretch his legs, and trot out of the small cottage he shared with Mr. Fletcher. His nose would twitch as he sniffed the crisp morning air, always on alert for anything unusual. His love for the flock was unmatched. He knew each sheep by sight, name, and sound, from Daisy, the playful little lamb, to Old Wooly, the oldest sheep in the flock. Bruno's job was not just about herding the sheep. It was about making sure they were safe and happy. Mr. Fletcher trusted Bruno completely. "You're my eyes and ears out there," he would say, giving Bruno a pat on the head each morning before they set out to the fields. One particularly warm summer day, the meadow was peaceful, with the sheep happily grazing in the sunshine. Bruno lay on a hill, his eyes half closed, but his ears always alert, listening for any sounds of trouble. It seemed like an ordinary day, but suddenly, a low rumbling growl reached his ears. Bruno's eyes snapped open. He stood up quickly, scanning the horizon. There, in the distance, just beyond the hills, he saw it, a dark cloud of dust rising from the forest. His heart raced as he sniffed the air. His keen nose picked up the scent he dreaded most: wolves. They were far away, but they were coming, and fast. Bruno let out a loud, sharp bark, alerting the flock. The sheep looked up from their grazing, confused and startled. Bruno barked again, circling them, his tail wagging with determination. "Stay together. Stay close," he barked in his dog language, nudging the sheep to gather in a tight group. The flock trusted Bruno completely. They huddled together, bleating nervously, their wide eyes scanning the horizon. Bruno stood tall, his legs strong and steady, ready to protect them at any cost. As the dust cloud grew closer, the shape of the wolves became clear. There were 3 of them, sleek and fast, their eyes fixed on the flock. Bruno knew he had to act quickly. He couldn't let the wolves get near the sheep. With a fierce growl, Bruno charged down the hill toward the wolves, his bark echoing through the valley. His powerful legs carried him across the meadow in long, swift strides. The wolves slowed down, startled by Bruno's bravery. They hadn't expected the flock to be so well guarded. Bruno barked again, louder this time, making it clear that the wolves were not welcome here. The largest wolf snarled, but Bruno stood his ground, his eyes locked on the intruders. He knew he couldn't fight all 3 wolves at once, so he had to outsmart them. Using his sharp instincts, Bruno led the wolves away from the flock, weaving through the trees and rocks, leading them on a wild chase. The wolves, hungry and determined, followed closely behind, but Bruno was faster and more clever. He zigzagged through the forest, confusing the wolves and making it difficult for them to catch him. As the chase continued, Bruno noticed something up ahead: a narrow ravine. It was deep, with jagged rocks at the bottom, but there was a fallen tree that created a bridge across it. Bruno quickly dashed across the tree, his paws light and swift. The wolves, blinded by their hunger, followed without thinking. But as the first wolf tried to cross the narrow tree, its paws slipped. The wolf yelped and fell into the ravine, landing safely on a ledge below. The other 2 wolves, seeing their packmate in danger, stopped in their tracks. Bruno barked again, standing tall on the other side of the ravine. The message was clear: go home. You're not welcome here. Realizing they had been outsmarted, the remaining wolves growled in frustration but turned and ran back into the forest. Bruno watched them disappear into the trees, his heart pounding with relief. Panting but proud, Bruno trotted back to the meadow where the flock was waiting. The sheep bleated happily when they saw him, crowding around him as if to say, "Thank you, Bruno. You saved us." Just as Bruno was checking to make sure all the sheep were safe, Mr. Fletcher arrived. He had seen the whole thing from the hilltop. "Bruno, you brave dog," Mr. Fletcher said, kneeling down to give Bruno a well-deserved pat on the head. "You saved the whole flock." Bruno wagged his tail, his eyes full of love for Mr. Fletcher and the sheep. He didn't need any praise. Knowing that his flock was safe was all the reward he needed. That evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, casting a golden glow over the meadow, Bruno lay down beside the flock. The sheep, feeling safe under Bruno's watchful eye, began to drift off to sleep. Mr. Fletcher sat nearby, tending to the fire, his heart full of gratitude for his loyal dog. Bruno watched the stars begin to twinkle in the darkening sky, his body tired but his spirit strong. He knew that tomorrow would bring another day of watching over the flock, guiding them to the greenest pastures and protecting them from danger. But Bruno was ready for whatever challenges might come, because he was more than just a dog. He was Bruno, the brave shepherd dog, and he would always be there to protect his flock, no matter what.